Good morning. Welcome to Revelation. I know we just finished with chapter 5, but we're moving on to chapter 6. Just a reminder of where we have been and what we're doing. Number one, John's been whisked up into heaven. He sees with his eyes. We're not entirely sure how he's seeing, and he's trying to describe of what he's seen. Chapter 4, he sees the throne. This is the rulership of God the Father, the dominion of God. And then he sees the Lamb who was slain. This Lamb now rules. So let's go on to chapter 6. Can we read verses 1 through 12 real quick, please?
Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a loud voice like thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the 2nd seal, I heard the living creature say, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in its hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine." When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. When he opened the 6th seal, I looked, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun had become black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth as the fig tree shed its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth and the great ones, and the generals and the rich and the powerful, and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?"
Okay. The first 4 seals belong in a group together, right? You have the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. As we get later on, we're going to put these on a chart so that you can look at, but I haven't figured out how to do the chart with the internet quite yet. These are so-called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The connection here between the 4 horsemen of this vision and the 4 mentioned in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 8 and 10, I cannot see a great connection between these 4 horsemen, except for the fact that there's 4, and there's 4 horses here, and there's 4 horsemen there. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. The opening of each of the seals does not usher in a reading of the corresponding part of the book. In fact, although the scroll is filled with writing, at no time does anybody ever read it. Okay, that's really sort of important to remember, because people sort of, they see into this, the breaking of the seals with the reading of the scroll and then the sending out of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. This is what the futurists say. The problem is that the scroll isn't read. He's breaking the seals, but it's not, you can't read the scroll until all the seals have been broken. So he breaks 1 seal. Let us note here that John does not see. What John sees here is super brief. It's only 2 verses devoted to each of the seals, 3 verses for the 5th, and then a very short paragraph for the 6th seal. The opening of the seventh seal is a different chapter altogether, and it takes us to an entirely different subject matter. The six seals together with the supplementary visions in chapter 7 are preliminary to what we might call the main event. What John sees each time the Lamb opens the seal is not something recorded in the scroll. It's what he sees going on in the throne of the dominion of God. The call, "Come and see," does not mean that John needs to draw near. It does not mean that he looks into the book. It does not mean that he's reading what's on the text, because nobody reads what's in the text quite yet. We immediately tend to jump to the conclusion that the substance of each part of this contents of the book are revealed to John as the seal is broken. The problem is, that's not what it says. Generally, when we read the book of Revelation, we get the translation, we get the Revelation wrong because we're adding too much to the text. Don't add to the text. Simply read it and let it stand for itself. Because if you read too much into it, this is where we run off on these little tangents of going, the four horsemen of the... Because everybody knows the four horsemen of the apocalypse are really bad, right? I hold that they're not really bad. This is common, everyday occurrences. Every day people die. Every day people suffer from peace. I know that sounds a little weird, but we'll get to that. Every day people suffer with economies that are uneven and unfair. It happens every day. All right, let's see if we can't blow some light bulbs. If you get confused, I've often found it's very helpful to a hymn to hum to yourself. Jesus loves me, this I know. And then we'll pull you back in later on. As with the voice of thunder, the living beasties each say, "Be going." Now, I know most of your Bibles are going to say, "Come here." The problem is the word eraxo. Am I saying that right? It's E-R-X-O-U. Eraxo means to come. It also means to go. It's one of those words that can mean come or to go, right? When my wife tells my kids to get moving, they know exactly what she's talking about. It may mean y'all need to get down the stairs and get out into the car. It may mean to get out of the car and get in the house and go up the stairs, right? Every mother knows what this means. Every once in a while, Stephanie can do this too. She snap her finger at the kids, and they all know they better get moving. And they know whether they're supposed to be coming or whether they're supposed to be going. This verb here is an aorist action verb, meaning it's a continual action. It's not like you're going to do it and then you're done. It's a continual action. This is what I like to say, when you tell your children, clean your rooms. Does that mean that they should clean it once and take 15 minutes and then let it go to pot for the rest of the life? No. You should always keep cleaning your room. When you cook, you clean as you go, right? All right. Remember, John is already there. He doesn't need to come, right? He doesn't need to go anywhere. This call, I believe, and honest people can argue and differentiate. I believe that the voice that says, "Be going," is not directed at John to come up to see. It's directed at the horsemen who are supposed to go. The futurists all say this is going to happen later here by my book. The preterist says this all happened here by my book. The spiritualists pray that this isn't going to happen to you. And unfortunately, I haven't written a book, so I can't tell you anything. John heard, and this starts the horsemen off. The horsemen then go out into the world. The four seals, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they are named, for they were used extensively in the Middle Ages to symbolize the ravages of war, pestilence, famine, and death. Note the four horsemen are very common. These are not spiritual events. These are not supernatural events. They are common events that are common to all men and all society. In apocalyptical literature, whenever an author wants to portray an event or a passage that are common with all human experiences, he will use symbols that are common to all human experiences. If he wants to talk about something that's supernatural, he's going to invent something that is supernatural. I don't like comic book movies. I don't like Superman movies and Batman movies and all. I don't mind watching them. Don't get me wrong. I've seen all of them, but they're sort of ridiculousness with their cosmic superheroes that go through atomic blasts and never get a scratch on them. It just sort of bores me after a while. And right now, I'm really bored with superheroes. I've gotten to this point now where I prefer my heroes to be quite a bit farther down on an earthly stage. I like to see them get beat up and be in the hospital for about 8 weeks so that they can recover, as opposed to like, hey, I just got beat up. Let's get back after him, guys. The horsemen are naturally occurring, yet fearsome and terrifying events. The scariest sound in the ancient world was the thundering of hooves, right? It was the most terrifying thing that you could think of, because rich people...
When would you like me to show these pictures you have of the horsemen?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yay, there's a picture, a very popular picture of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And again, you see these four horsemen as coming down onto earth and doing this massive amount of destruction. It's not a bad representation of what's going on, because all of these things are symbols. My point is that they're not supernatural events. They're natural events. Like I said, the most terrifying thing in the ancient world was the thundering of hooves, right? Because rich people owned horses. They usually traveled with a bit of an entourage. So if you're some sort of a plebeian farmer sitting there hoeing your field, minding your own business, and you heard the thunder of hooves, it's time to do what? Put the hoe down and go find a wife and kids and make sure that everybody is either in the house or out of the way. Oh, okay. I'll see him in a second. I'm sorry. Anyway, rich people ride horses. They usually have an entourage. Armored people come and visit you when you're hoeing your little field and minding your own business. All of a sudden, you get armored people. Dangerous people ride horses. All right? And the more horses you get, the more dangerous it's become. A bunch of horses, the most dangerous thing you could have in the ancient world. And lo, I saw a white horse, he who was sitting upon it, having a bow, and there was given unto him a crown, and he went forth to overcome. So let's see that next picture, see if this is a little bit of a better picture, because I can't remember him. Ooh, spooky, right? These are the futurists. This is the idea of the futurists, right? The four horsemen of the apocalypse are coming, and guess what? They are going to bring death and destruction upon the likes the world has never seen, and everybody's going to die. We're supposed to be afraid of that picture, right? I'm telling you, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the things that they represent are common, normal, everyday events. Let's see what the next one looks like. We got people dying as far as the eye can see. I'm not even sure if that's a biblical understanding of the four horsemen of the apocalypse or not. I mean, there's all kinds of, I don't mean to jump over here, but we got, look like demons and people coming from the sky, and they're just destroying mankind like you wouldn't even, this one's got snakes and stuff up there. But again, if you go to Google and type in four horsemen of the apocalypse, this is the kind of stuff that you're going to get. It's terrifying. In fact, it's hard to find a picture on the internet of the four horsemen of the apocalypse that's not terrifying. Is there another one? One more. Yeah, this is what I call the Lord of the Rings, four horsemen of the apocalypse. I mean, doesn't that artwork look like something out of the Lord of the Rings? I mean, it's completely fantastic, but again, terrifying. Let's go to the next one. And lo, I saw a white horse. Remember what lo means. Ah! There's a white horse, and he who sits upon it has a bow, and there was given unto him a crown, and he went forth overcoming that he may come. Remember I said that the horsemen are going. So we see this again here, that they are going. The white horse has a battle bow and he wears a crown. He goes forth to conquer. He exists to conquer, and he will be victorious in the effort. The white indicates the horseman believes in the righteousness of his cause. Right? Can you think of anything more dangerous than somebody who absolutely believes that he is right and everybody else is wrong? And he's also in charge? He has the divine right to conquer. He has divine right to be victorious. White is the color of wisdom. It's the color of majesty. It is the color of holiness. It is the color of righteousness. The best description is that his role is the most common evil that causes military and tyrannical dominance. It is the classic triumphant militarism of Rome, of the Huns, of the Empire of Japan, even the United States, as we marched across North America under the red, white, and blue of manifest destiny. Right? We looked to the west and we went, we own everything until we get to the Pacific. And we just sort of, over a matter of a couple of hundred years, just marched all the way across. The only thing that hemmed us in the north was Canada and South and Mexico. And tell you what, with Mexico, we sort of took anything that we decided that we wanted, didn't we? We sort of, we'll take these little pieces here, there, and everywhere. All right? This white horse is supposed to be you see it all the time in the artwork as being terrifying. But it's not terrifying. It's normal human politics. I'm the ruler. I know best. The bow is mainly a defensive weapon. So he is defending his people. He has a crown and he's got people under him and he's going to defend them to the best of his ability. So long as you're on his side of the wall and not the other side of the wall, it's really no big deal. But when you're on the other side of the wall, you're like, he's a little scary. All right, next verse. And when I opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come," and behold. And there went forth another horse, a red horse, and him who was sitting on it, and there was given unto him to take the peace from the land. And another one that they may slay, and there was given unto him a great sword. Right? The bow is a primarily defensive weapon, but the sword, not defensive. It's more of an offensive weapon. Everyone agrees that the red horse is war. Some try to dispute the significance of white, but red is easily something everybody agrees on. Red is the color of fire. Red is the color of blood. The giant sword is the symbol of war and bloodshed. And it matches up with Jesus' words, with the words of the text, that he has the power to take the peace from the land. Matthew chapter 24, verse 6 and 7. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. The red horse enforces war. The white horse enforces peace. Now I'm going to tell you, what's the difference between enforced peace and enforced war? Perspective. The only difference is perspective. And then, when I opened the third seal, I heard a third living creature say, "Come and behold, and lo, a black horse, and he who's sitting on it having balances in his hand. And I heard the voice in the midst of the four living creatures say, a measure of wheat for a denarii, and 3 measures of barley for a denarii. And the oil and the wine thou mayest not harm." The black horse, the color of death, which is often a result of famine. He has scales and the cry of price controls, right? We have an economic calamity that has resulted in price controls. A measure of wheat for a denarii, 3 measures of barley for a denarii. These are outlandish prices for the most basic of material that we're going to use to sustain our life. A denarius was a day wage. I mean, it's a whole day. Could you imagine getting 1 measure of flour and having to work all day for that tiny little measure of flour? We have poverty the likes the world has not seen, right? Again, these are not supernatural events. This happens. I mean, this happened in Venezuela just a couple of years ago. They're using wheelbarrows to wheel in money so that they can buy a loaf of bread. There's currency in the street because it's useless. You can't do anything with it. You think about that, the median wage in America is about $75 a day. Could you imagine flour, a pound of flour even going for $75? That's pretty outlandish. There's nothing left for other needs, right? If you're going to pay $75, if you're going to take all day, a day's labor to buy a pound of flour, there's no money for anything else. All we're going to do is buy flour. However, there's still plenty of wheat and barley to be had. It's just super expensive. The common man scarcely has enough substance in order to produce, to care for his family. But that's only half the picture. The oil and the wine you shall not injure. Again, we have price controls. The olive oil, the fat of the Oriental world, for America, it's cow fat. For us, it's butter and cream and milk. That's sort of the fat that sort of runs our society. In the Near Eastern world, it was olive oil. Wine is the most common beverage in that area, which is why it gets so much time in the Bible. Why would you injure the oil or the wine in the midst of a famine? Well, you dump it, right? Everybody's spending all of their money on wheat and barley, so they spend all their money on wheat and barley, so no one's buying the wine and no one's buying the olive oil, which happens to what? The stocks. The stocks go. All of a sudden, you've got kegs and kegs of oil, but nobody can afford it because they're spending all their money on this, and so they can't. So what are you going to do with it? Can't sell it. It's just going to sit in your barn and rot. And so they dump it. Why would anybody injure the oil and the wine in the midst of a famine? There's too much of it. Too little grain, too much oil, too much wine, and it's worthless. Why we pay too much for the necessary grain? We can't afford the oil. We can't afford the wine. Stocks grow. Now it's worthless. No one can afford, and you can't even give it away. Better to burn the oil and dump the wine, so to decrease the supply and thus stabilize the system. But the voice says you're not allowed to do that, right? The person in charge of the government says you're not allowed to do that. Even in America, learned all about this during the Great Depression. Remember the Great Depression? And everybody like, whoa, the Great Depression was great. You could get an apple for a nickel. The problem is, Grandma went, yeah, it's great, but who had a nickel? Nobody had a nickel. It's perfect. You just can't afford anything. To call the Black Horse famine or the wrong social system, you could blame capitalism, you can blame commercialism, you could blame communism or socialism. The problem is he's got a balance in his hand, and the balance is all out of whack. This is a system that's gone completely out of whack. This horse speaks about commercialism and finance that has run amok. Again, this is a regular, old, common, everyday problem that lots of societies have had. We've seen it even within our lifetimes of an economic system being thrown out of whack and the suffering that it's going to cause. Commentators like to combine the red and the black warrior, or the red and the black thing, as if You've got peace from the white horse, and then you've got war, and war leads to famine. I don't think that that's necessarily 1, 2, 3, and then going on to 4. I think any of these can happen to any country at any time, right? Any ruler of any country can just go, you know what? I'm not giving up power. I'm going to stay. I've got divine right. In fact, that's one of the necessary needs. If you're going to have a dictator, you have to have somebody who doesn't think that the nation can survive without him. That's what autocrats are. They're like, you cannot do this without me. You have to have me in charge because no one else can do the job that I do. Any nation can be plunged into war, whether they want it or not. Any nation can have these problems with their economic system. I think America, right now in 2020, we're still dealing with the COVID, which has really done a job on our economy, but our economy, it's teeter. I think we're doing a pretty good job for considering what's going on. Everybody's sort of holding even keel. But it can happen to anything. Let's go on to this next little section. And then he opened the fourth seal. And I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come and behold." And I saw, and lo, a pale horse. And he was sitting upon it is the name of Death and Hades. This is the first death, not the abyss. And it does follow him. And there he was given over the authority to kill, over a fourth of the land, with a sword and with hunger and with death and by the beasts of the land. This symbol seems to be the plainest. It simply represents death, calamitous death. It's hardly necessary to talk about it. It's just so common to all of mankind. The pale horse was given authority, i.e., it means by the Lamb and not by the devil. Here the rider's name is Death, who, like the other riders, is personified by the substantiated participation in the one who sits upon the horse. Note, Hades is a place of indeterminate possession into which all of the souls of the dead go. This is not death and damnation. This is regular, plain old death. Remember in our confessions, and from there he shall come to judge the living and the dead, right? The redeemed and those who are destined to hell. They're risen and then they will be judged. So we're going to talk about our boxes next week, and we're going to start a chart to help you visualize all of this. But just suffice to say, these four horsemen of the apocalypse, again, I don't think they're of the apocalypse. You got four horsemen who go out from the throne, from the dominion of God. You have the white horse with the bow, which is enforced peace. The red horse with a great sword, which is war. The black horse with scales and unjust commerce. And the pale horse of death. He doesn't have anything in his hands. Of course, he's death. He doesn't really need anything. And then he opened the fifth seal. The effect produced in the case of the last three seals is entirely different and completely unique from the four. No additional horsemen appear. No beasties shout be going. Regarding the fifth seal, John writes, "And I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been killed because they were faithful unto the word of God and to the message that they had received." Because an altar is now mentioned, some think of a temple scene, and they combine the throne scene from chapter 4 with the scene of the Lamb in the book in chapter 5, with this altar in chapter 6, and the whole arrangement of the temple as we find it in Jerusalem, save that they move everything around. The phrase introduced by beneath, like an adverb and a phrase occurring in chapter 4, verse 4, etc., is not an indication of a spatial relation, not so much as under, but maybe below. As an aside, the souls they don't have bodies. Some commentaries try to give them bodies, which they deem necessary for John to have seen them, because you can't see a soul. But remember, John is not on earth. He is in heaven, which may change the rules of physics. All right, so did the one seated on the throne in 4:2 have a body so that John could see him? Do the myriad of angels in chapter 5, verse 11, do they have bodies so that John can see them? This seeing is not done by means of John's natural eye, for twice we have been told that he is here in the Spirit. So his natural eyes may not even be there. He may be seeing with his spiritual eyes. I don't like the way that sounds, so don't quote me on it. But what exactly did God start having difficulty in letting men see what he wanted them to see? For those souls that were slain were saying, how long until you judge the earth and punish them for killing us? Then each one of them was given a white robe, and he was told to wait just a short time longer. There were still some of their fellow servants and brothers and sisters and the servants of Christ who must be killed, as it were. And they have to wait until this is finished. Non-Lutherans find great difficulty in this cry for judgment in the light of Jesus praying for his murderers. Stephen does the same thing. And it is asked pointedly, how can Stephen, the martyr, cry for his murderers on earth, and then in heaven his soul cry for vengeance? The answer is simple. It is the differentiation between law and gospel. We speak in law and gospel. God speaks to us in law and gospel. A cry for mercy doesn't abdicate the law's rule for justice. A prayer for pardon is offered to those who still have time for grace to repent, but a cry being for vengeance is uttered at a time when grace is past and judgment has gone by. So it's just a simple case of law and judgment. Because you're assuming, like, if the martyrs are sitting there below the altar, not underneath it. I don't like the idea of them being like underneath the altar with the altar sort of setting on them. I think of the altar as being more high and exalted, with them being below the altar. You're looking up to the altar. Right here, we are below the cross, not necessarily under it. Does that make sense? If we're under the altar, we can cry out for vengeance, for God to create vengeance upon those who martyred us, while still in earth praying for God to have mercy upon them. All right, let's go on. And then I saw a sixth seal. This was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair. Is that right? Black as sackcloth of hair, and the whole moon became as blood, and the stars fell from the earth as a fig tree casteth off her ripe figs when she is shaken in a great wind. And heaven was removed as the scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved from their places, and the kings of the earth and the princes and the chief captains and the rich and the strong and every bond and free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. And thus to say, the mountains and the rocks fall upon us and hide us from the face of him who sits upon the throne, God the Father, and the wrath of the Lamb, God the Son, from the great day of their wrath which is to come, and who is able to stand. With this, with Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 through 11, in minds, we hardly need to look at this at all. Here we have, in number 6, sort of a picture of the end. This figure is used and simply figures the most direct quote of Jesus on earth. Shaking, the sun is gone, the moon is full, the heaven is gone, the stars are falling, the mountains, the islands are all gone. The dispute is to whether this cataclysm is to be dated before what the futurists call the Great Tribulation, or what the rapturists call the rapture, which is unimportant since neither will happen the way they think it is. Okay? The important point is to remember that the sixth seal places us at the end, right? You have horseman 1, horseman 2, horseman 3, horseman 4. Regular everyday calamities that happen on the face of the earth. Then you go to 5, which is the martyrs in heaven praying for you to bring the end. And then in 6, you are right at the end, right? This is, Jesus talks about this throughout his ministry. You have these great tribulations and famines and wars and all of these things are going to happen, which he just said, all of these things are going to happen. They happen all the time. They happen all over the world. They can happen to us at any time. You know, the next big virus we get may be significantly more dangerous than COVID-19. I mean, could you imagine some of the viruses that Ebola that they've been fighting in Africa for quite some time, hitting us and not knowing about it? It'd be calamitous. The important thing is the 6th seal takes us almost to the very end. 5 seals extend us to the very end, but they do not name that end. The 5th seal only mentions the end until, etc. The 6th presence only to the end, taking Jesus' words into consideration, only certainly the phenomena occurring at the end because of the number 6. We see these 6 indicate that Revelation is not yet complete. There is still more to follow. The 7th seal is yet to be revealed, right? So you have all of this stuff going on. You have the martyrs. You got all of the crazy stuff going on at the end. And then we're waiting on the 7th seal. What is the 7th seal? We'll get to that in a second. Verse 15. And the kings of the earth and the princes, the chief captains and the strong and the rich and every bondsman and freedman, they hid themselves in the caves and the rocks and the mountains. And they say to the mountains and the rocks, fall upon us and hide us from the face who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb and from the great day of their wrath is to come. Who is able to stand? It has been said that men cannot do what is stated here such a claim is unwarranted. As a rule, in apocalyptical literature, natural things that are common to the totality of human experience, are put into common and natural ways, like the first 4 horsemen. But supernatural events are put into supernatural terms, like the 6th sign. No, men can't hardly talk to the mountains or the hill and have the hills or the mountains obey them. But in apocalyptical literature, they do. This is an indication of a supernatural event. When Christ comes for the 7th sign, which is, we'll get there, but it's later on in the text, much later on in Romans or Revelation. But when Christ comes, it will be a supernatural event. This is what he's saying. The language that describes that these people is to be taken from the Old Testament. Isaiah chapter 2, Hosea chapter 10, verse 8. Also see Luke chapter 23 and 30. They shall begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and unto the hills, cover us. And that brings us to that very end, right? Because the 7th sign moves on to the next chapter, that 7th seal, and that 7th seal starts off with darkness. But I think we have an interlude before we get to, or not darkness, we get silence, which is what I really like. Because you get 4 naturally occurring calamities. The witnesses go and please bring this to an end. You get wars and rumors of wars of Jesus, and then you get to the 7th and you get silence. It's very theatrical. It's like, whoa! And then we start the cycle over again. Okay? All right. Bye, Internet. We'll see y'all later.